My name is Gabby Pacheco, and I am with TheDream.Us, as you all know. Um, just want to give you a few key information before we start. So the first 30 minutes is going to be in English, and then after that is going to be in Spanish. So just hang on tight if you're with your family, if you're with people that are not English speakers. We will have this presentation in Spanish. So with us today, we have the beautiful team of TheDream.Us and also a very special guest, AJ, and I'll tell you a little bit more about her in a second. But we're here because we want to provide for you as much information, clear information about what this Florida law will do and will not. But we also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of fear, that there's a lot of misinformation, and that we understand what you're going through. Myself, as a former dreamer, an immigrant, somebody that currently has undocumented people in my family, this is really, really worrisome. But I do want to say that we're here to provide the support that you need in order to ensure that your well-being is set. So the first thing I do want to acknowledge is that some of you have reached out to ask for mental health support. And I'm really happy that you're doing that. And we're going to do what we can to support you with that beyond what your college campuses have. We know that that college campuses, and we'll provide that information for you now in the chat. Our college campuses do have counselors and mental health individuals that are there to support you. But we're also trying to find somebody that is culturally sensitive and that can provide more targeted information for our communities. And so I do want to say that you all have shared with us that 1 in 5 of you have said that you need mental health supports, and then also that 1 in 5 of you are actually using mental health support. So there's nothing wrong with that. We want to say that, we're here to provide that support for you. And so thank you for coming to us for that. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you AJ. I met AJ in 2006. She actually was our immigration attorney, and she was there fighting when immigration targeted our family and detained my parents and sisters and put them in deportation proceedings. And I have looked up to AJ for so many years now. She has been a fierce advocate and now is working at SPLC, and SPLC is the Southern Poverty Law Center. I had the pleasure of working with her throughout the session. They were the ones actually in Tallahassee every single day fighting against this anti-immigrant legislation. And they're still here with us. And today she is going to introduce and explain to you what passed, because unfortunately, there is one that was really, really ugly version of this bill that first got introduced, but that is not what passed. And so she's going to now share with you all that information. And we did put together infographics of what the bill is. And so we're going to share that with you so you can follow along. But I'm going to now turn it over to AJ.
Thank you so much, Gabby. I really appreciate that. And thank you for inviting me and for opening up the space and making sure that the right information is getting out to everyone. So really hats off to you all, because like you were saying, there is so much misinformation out there that is floating around. And so, yes. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to go necessarily in chronological order of the way the sections are laid out in the bill. I'm going to start with what I think are the sections that are most worrisome. And from what I've heard, most people are really worried about the most, and that potentially has the most widespread impact on our communities. So I'm gonna start there. And I think the first one is the human smuggling section. So that is section 10 of the bill. And so there was a initial version, the first version of this bill was awful and much broader than the final version that we got. And when everybody talks about the major changes to the bill, this is the section, and this is the section that I think has most people really, really confused. So first, this section of the bill, which is going to become law in July. So although DeSantis signed it, it doesn't go into effect until July 1st. And this applies for the human smuggling section and for every other section of the bill. So what this does is, yes, it does put people in Florida at risk of being charged with a felony for transporting a broad category of immigrants from outside of Florida into Florida, okay? So I'm just going to repeat that. This is only for crossing into Florida. And so who does it put at risk? So anyone who is, for example, driving a car coming from Alabama into Florida, the way this bill would work, or this law is going to work, and how it amends the human smuggling section is that it would make it a third-degree felony to knowingly and willfully transport into Florida, and this is the tricky part, anyone who entered the US first in violation of the law, and two, who has not been inspected by the federal government since they entered unlawfully, okay? So why is this tricky and why is it confusing? One is because the concept of being just inspected on its own doesn't really exist in immigration law. You'll hear immigration lawyers, immigration judges, immigration advocates talk about entering without inspection. You'll hear inspection and admission, and it's typically a concept that applies when you cross at a land border, right? But the concept of inspection alone has never been litigated and is not defined on its own. So what this bill did was it kind of made up a term, its own kind of immigration term, immigration law at the state level, which is not really, shouldn't happen, and is what makes it confusing. So two categories of people are at risk. One is the person who's driving. The person who's driving, whether you're a US citizen or a permanent resident, the person who's driving is going to be the person who's at risk of a third-degree felony for doing that transportation across the border, across the Florida, across state lines, not border, across from Georgia into Florida, Alabama into Florida. The second risk is who's in the car. So if you're, say, driving a van coming from, let's say you had a soccer game in Georgia, and your team is in a van driving from Georgia back to Miami, for example. And your coach is a US citizen and driving you all. It really should not be the responsibility of your coach to know everyone's status in the van. But there's the question of who's in the van, right? Who's on your team, who's in the van. You're not going to know someone who is now a permanent resident if they ever entered the US unlawfully and entered quote unquote EV, for example, because now they're a permanent resident, right? So you don't know that. Your coach isn't expected to know that. But is this law going to apply to that person, to the person who is now a permanent resident who may have entered without inspection? Maybe. The answer is maybe. Would it apply to someone who's undocumented? Possibly not, because if they overstayed a visa, they would have entered and been inspected and admitted, and they would have entered lawfully, right? So, and there are 1,000,001 different scenarios on immigration status, because we all know that immigration status is fluid. Immigration status changes. We could all be in different stages of immigration status. And so what is important for you to protect yourself? First off, if you are unclear about your immigration status, the number one most important thing is to talk to a licensed immigration attorney who can walk through and clarify any of that for you, any lack of clarity for you, so that you are 100% aware for yourself, so that you don't have any doubts as to that. Second, same for your family members. That is going to be one of the most important steps for you, is to have that sort of clarity. The second thing is knowing that it is not clear how this law is going to be applied, because there's so much discretion as to how law enforcement may apply this. As of a year ago, this law in and of itself, it makes a change as to identifying kind of a immigration status within the law, but the prior human smuggling statute also made it unlawful for trying to bring someone across state lines. Doesn't go into as much detail as this version of the bill, but in the past there have been, for example, Florida Highway Patrol stationed near the Alabama border and stopping people and tried to bring charges, which all failed in North Florida under the prior human smuggling statute. So is that going to continue? So what I'm saying is there is a status quo right now of where there have been Florida Highway Patrol stationed in different spots along North Florida for a while now. So is it going to be the same? Are they going to be removed from there? Are there going to be more of them? We don't know. The answer is we don't know. And we don't know how those law enforcement officers are going to try to identify people, identify cars. We don't know how they were doing it in the past. So there is a lot of doubt as to how it's going to be applied. But I think the big takeaway is the intent behind this was to frighten everyone. Now, does Florida really have those resources to really have more law enforcement out there? Possibly. But I think it's going to be a little while before we know exactly how it's going to be applied. And there's just no easy way to say, yes, they're going to be, this is going to happen or that is going to happen. I would be just going into hypotheticals there. So there is a lack of clarity, and I think it's important to be transparent about that lack of clarity as to how law enforcement is going to interpret this. Because if you do get stopped, so this is going back on, just prior Know Your Rights of if you are stopped as someone who is undocumented in a car, everyone in the car, you're not required to talk to that law enforcement officer, and you're not required to provide them with your immigration status. Okay, so those are things that you don't have to provide to them about your immigration status. Now, if it's CBP, that might be a different story. But if it's a sheriff, Florida Highway Patrol, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, they don't have to know your immigration status. And there's always strength in everyone in the car or everyone in a house, for example. If there are questions about immigration status, even if you're a U.S. citizen and you're in that car, you don't have to speak up and say, oh, I'm a U.S. citizen, because you don't want to create that doubt for everybody else who's in the car. So that's just a tidbit that's important for everybody to know, that you don't have to share your immigration status. You don't have to share where you were born or anything like along those lines. You don't have to answer those types of questions. So I hope that is helpful in understanding a little bit more about what is actually in the human smuggling statute. One other quick point I do want to raise is that there is an additional increased level of a felony for the human smuggling statute if it is a person who is under 18 who is being transported across state lines into Florida. It creates a second-degree felony, which I think goes up to 15 years. So third degree, I believe, is 5 years in terms of the penalty, and second degree is 15. So I did want to add that on there so that folks are aware that there is that kind of increased risk and penalty for anyone under 18. So yeah, go ahead.
I just want to do like a really quick recap, because that was, I think, a lot, right, of really crucial information. But just so you all understand, so this bill has passed. This bill has been signed into law, and starting in July, some of these things are going to start being implemented. Right now, we don't know how they're going to be implemented, but what we know is that what we have seen in the past, right, with immigrants, and what they want to start doing now. And what's key and important is that you understand that this component of it is only when you are traveling and you're coming in to the state of Florida. A lot of people believe that what the bill was before, which said if you were traveling within the state of Florida, this would be an issue, or also the housing, right, of immigrants. And we know we have gotten a call, for example, from a scholar who their landlord is now telling them, oh, with this new law, you cannot be here and stuff. And that is not true. So we want to make sure that you understand and know what passed, okay? And then the second thing that I think it's the most important thing for you to know is that you do have rights, and that if you happen to leave the state and come back, right, with your family, and there's somebody in the car that does not have, and that might meet this criteria of being an immigrant, right, for purposes of the smuggling piece, that you do have the right, and you have ways to protect all of yourselves, including not disclosing and saying, well, I'm a citizen, I'm a DACA recipient, I'm a resident, etc. You can all say we decline to answer that question. So we're going to be sharing with you Know Your Rights pieces. We have once a month our immigration attorney that comes on, and the second piece of it is the Know Your Rights piece. So we really highly suggest that you continue to come to these things and learn, what are the different rights that you and your family have, so that you can protect yourself from, putting yourself in a predicament now with this law. So I think, AJ, one of the things too that people are asking about and they're confused is the hospital. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. And really quickly, just before we move to the hospital, I do see that there's some questions about flying into the state of Florida. So I do want to answer that. So yes, this does have to, the bill does say transport into the state of Florida. So transport can be anything: planes, trains, cars, whatever it is. The important thing to remember, however, is if you are flying, that is the jurisdiction of the federal government. It is TSA who is at the airport, and they require a real ID, for example, or a passport, right, to fly. And that is to, those procedures are not going to change in terms of flying. If there are reports of airlines who require something different for flying into the state, then that's important for us to know. And that's going to be really important to get to the SPLC, because that could definitely form the basis, potentially form the basis for a lawsuit. So we definitely need to hear about that, but it shouldn't change because that is up to TSA who they let fly, right, and who they let go through security. So yes, the next section that I think everyone is asking about is the hospital data collection. So that is section 5 of the bill, and this is what it requires. Any hospital that receives Medicaid, which is pretty much almost every hospital, I think, is required to ask about immigration status. So how is this done in the bill? What it says is on a hospital registration form or patient admission form. There's going to be a question now, and this is after July 1st, so not right now. there's still a little bit of time before that happens. But on patient admission forms and on registration forms, there will be a new question that asks whether the patient is a U.S. citizen or lawfully present in the United States, or not lawfully present in the United States. And then that information is going to go to the Agency for Healthcare Administration. Now, so you're going to see this question on those forms when you first get to the hospital. There should be a statement on the form, and this is something that the bill requires, that the law is going to require. The same form that asks you about your citizenship status also has to say, your response to this question will not affect patient care. That means they're telling you, no matter how you answer this question, that doesn't mean that we're going to turn you away for any particular type of care, or we're going to, turn you away at all. And then the second important thing is there's also required to be a statement on those same forms, on the patient admission and the patient registration forms, that your response to this question will not result in a report to immigration authorities. So those are two very important clarifications that everybody needs to know and that you should see on those hospital forms. And this bill only applies to hospitals that accept Medicaid. This doesn't have anything to do with doctors' offices, the health clinic, or any other place where you're going to seek care. It has to do with hospitals that receive Medicaid. Okay, so it's not every form of healthcare, right? It's limited to those hospitals and emergency rooms, right, that receive Medicare. Medicaid. So, like I mentioned before, this information is going to go to the Agency for Healthcare Administration. From what the bill sponsor said during the legislative session, this data is supposed to go on its own to the agent, to ACA, it's short. So it'll go to them. It's not supposed to have any sort of identifying information about the patient, but just what the law is going to require is the total number of hospital admissions and the total number of emergency department visits is going to be reported. And those reports have to say whether the patients were U.S. citizens, whether they were lawfully present, whether they were not lawfully present, or whether they declined to answer. So what that tells us is you don't have to answer it. So my recommendation, I think everyone's conclusion is coming to at this point is don't answer it if you don't have to. Just like we're not required to answer a police officer's question about our immigration status. Similar situation here. The response to the question is not supposed to affect patient care, and it's not supposed to result in any report to immigration authorities. And the report itself anticipates people will not answer the question. And so there is a spot for the data being provided saying people are not answering the question. So whether you are a DACA recipient, whether you are a permanent resident, whether you're a visa holder, whether you're undocumented, whatever it is, if there's an option that we don't answer this question, we should take that. We should take that opportunity and not provide that data. So eventually, what the bill does as well is that information is going to go to the governor and the leaders of the legislature each year in a report. And we don't know how that data is going to be used. If it's going to be used in litigation, if it's going to be used for future laws, we don't know. But if their data is skewed because people aren't answering the question, then that's a way to thwart this law.
Yeah, and so we only have a couple of more minutes before we have to transition into Spanish, but I did want to say that there is a larger campaign that we're asking everybody that goes to the hospital, regardless of their immigration status, again, in solidarity, to also put decline to answer. So that way, if there is 100 people that put decline to answer and 10 of them happen to be undocumented, they're not going to know from the 100, right, who's who. So I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that there is a larger group of people that are going to be willing to, and we're telling people you don't have to answer this question. And so really quickly, I know there's a couple of questions, AJ, around this idea, right? Like, what if you decline to answer? Will there be a consequence? And specifically for police officers, right? If a police officer stops you for speeding and they start asking you further questions, like, will there be a consequence if you decline to answer?
So there has to be some other basis for the stop. So a law enforcement officer, like a sheriff, can't stop you just because they think that you're undocumented. That's not a basis for a stop. There has to be some state law reason for a stop, whether it's the license plate isn't registered, you ran a red light, you were speeding. There has to be some other basis for that. And then within the jurisdiction that you're in, within the county that you're in, it depends on what is permitted at that within those counties. Some say they stop the driver and the driver doesn't have a driver's license. In some counties, it could be that they just let you go, that they issue you a citation, or they do have to take the person into custody because they don't have a driver's license or identification. So that depends on the area that you're in. So there is no one size fits all, especially within Florida. So that is going to apply to the driver. As to the passengers, that unless there is some other state law basis for them having raised some sort of suspicion as to the passengers, it should not lead to that. However, fair warning, I have heard of incidents where law enforcement will just go ahead and call CBP to a traffic stop, and then that information is lost as to whether there was no, without any citation issued. So that is a possibility, and whether or not, those are very rare instances, but it is, I do feel like I need to share that fair warning that has happened in the past. But it is very rare that does happen, because if local law enforcement doesn't have a basis, a state law basis for arresting someone, then they can't be doing that, because there has to be a basis within the citation or whatever it is that the paperwork that they file.
So AJ, really quickly, just before we turn into Spanish, again, does the law apply to outpatient clinics or other systems?
This only applies to hospitals that accept Medicaid. So just the hospital. It doesn't apply to your doctor, your regular doctor's office. It does not apply to, say, for a pediatrician's office, or just a regular appointment to go get your physical. Only if you're going to the hospital. That's the only instance.
Right. So there is other components of the law, and I'm going to really quickly go over them just so that you have this information. But again, this we have put in a chart that has the most important key things for you all. But the other thing that this bill does is that now it requires employers with 25 employees or more to use the E-Verify system. What does that mean? Is that, if there is companies or employers that have over 25 employees, they're going to be required for any employee to go through this system. The other thing is that for those who have out-of-state driver's licenses, they're going to be invalidated for the state of Florida. But one thing I do want to know is that it doesn't change the fact that out-of-state licenses in the state of Florida, if you are a Florida resident and you're living here more than 30 days, they require you to change your license and have a driver's license. So that, again, back to AJ's point, is fear mongering. is trying to create a sense of fear, right? Of like, oh, this is what we're going to do. And the whole idea is to try to drive out people out of the state of Florida, to not let people come into the state of Florida. And that's what we're also trying to fight back, to say, be informed and don't, it's your decision if you want to leave the state, but don't do it because you think that this is happening now, right? And things are going to be way worse, right? There is consequences. And yes, we are not going to lie to you, and we're going to be transparent that some of these things are very worrisome, and we don't really know how they're going to start working on it. But just use this information and know your rights, and before you do that. The last thing that I want to tell you is that some of you probably got community IDs through branches or other places in the state that have these. Those are still valid. The only thing is that now it prohibits from municipalities and public funding to use this. So if there is private funding that is going to be given to these IDs, they will continue to be able to provide these. And then the other thing I know that I saw is that people were asking about the law license. What it does is that in 2028, people will not be able to, in essence, ask for admission to practice law here in the state of Florida, so be able to sit for the bar. Anybody that currently has their law license will still be able to. So if you're a documented person with a law license, you're good. And again, this does not start happening until 2028. So with all of that, I want to say thank you. I don't know if anybody wants to stay on for the Spanish one. You're more than welcome to, but now we're going to switch our caps and vamos a ahora hacerlo en español, porque sabemos que hay muchas familias que están aquí y que quieren esta información. Y nuestra abogada es una buena amiga mía. Ella fue la abogada que ayudó a mi familia en el 2006 cuando inmigración puso a mi familia y a mis hermanas en deportación. Y es buena abogada porque todavía ellos están aquí, gracias a Dios. Y ahora ella es una luchadora que sigue luchando por nosotros y está trabajando para la organización que se llama The Southern Poverty Law Center. Ellos han luchado por muchos años, estuvieron ahí todos los días en Tallahassee trabajando, asegurándose que esta legislación no fuera tan fea como es. Y queremos dar información porque hay mucha misinformación, hay muchas cosas erróneas que no son reales de lo que es esta ley, pero sí hay cosas que son preocupantes y nosotros queremos que ustedes sepan y que se armen con información y que sepan sus derechos. Entonces ahora ella nos va a contar. Le voy a pedir a ella que yo sé que es mucha información, que vamos a tratar de hacerlo lo más importante y vamos a seguir mandando información en español para ustedes y su familia. AJ.
Gracias, Gaby. Bueno, sí, es una ley muy grande. La amplitud es asombrosa y hay 22 diferentes partes, más de 50 páginas. Entonces, lo que les voy a decir primero es que no voy a repasar todas las partes de la nueva ley. Voy a repasar las partes que creo que todos tienen más preguntas y tienen más preocupaciones sobre esas partes. Y una cosa importante de tener en mente desde el principio es que aunque el gobernador ya firmó esta ley, no toma efecto hasta el 1 de julio. Entonces, en este mismo momento, no está en efecto hasta el 1 de julio. Entonces, eso es algo importante de tener en mente cuando repasamos todo esto, porque pueden oír toda esta información, hacer preguntas, tomar toda su situación en cuenta y luego hacer decisiones. Y eso es importante, entender qué está dentro de esta ley. Entonces, voy a empezar con la primera parte, que es la parte 10 de la ley, que tiene que ver con cambios a la ley de contrabando de personas. Entonces, creo que lo más importante saber aquí es que esto tiene que ver con el transporte de personas de otro estado, por ejemplo, Georgia o Alabama, de transportar personas de otro estado a la Florida. De una persona que tal vez pueda ser indocumentada o que no, más bien que nunca fue inspeccionada. Y esto es algo importante de entender, que no necesariamente quiere decir que es alguien que está indocumentada, sino quiere decir que es alguien que no entró ilegalmente primero, y luego la segunda parte es que entró sin ser inspeccionada después de entrar al país ilegalmente, por ejemplo. Entonces, lo que es un poco confuso con eso es que la ley federal de inmigración no usa esa palabra inspeccionar sola. Esa palabra no tiene definición, no ha sido parte de casos, sino es parte de diferentes conceptos dentro de la ley de inmigración. Por ejemplo, entrar sin inspección es un término. Otro término es ser admitido e inspeccionado, y eso tiene que ver con otras partes de la ley de inmigración. Entonces, lo que pasó aquí con esta ley, porque fue escrito por personas que no entienden la ley federal, es que usa la palabra inspeccionar sola. Entonces, ¿quiénes están a peligro con esta ley? Va a ser alguien que está haciendo la manejada, por ejemplo, de Alabama a Florida. La persona que va manejando o tal vez manejando el tren, un autobús, una camioneta, un carro, lo que sea. Esa persona, la que va haciendo el transporte, es la persona que puede ser acusada del contrabando de personas y sujetado a un delito de tercer grado para personas más de 18 y segundo grado para personas menos de 18. Entonces, esa es la primera parte. No importa si la persona que va manejando es ciudadano, residente, tiene visa, no importa. Esa es la persona que puede ser acusado con ese delito de contrabando de personas. ¿Quiénes son la segunda categoría de personas? Va a ser quienes están en el carro, la camioneta, el autobús, que viene de otro estado y va cruzando para entrar al estado de la Florida. Por ejemplo, si es una camioneta, si ustedes fueron a un evento en Georgia y van manejando de regreso a Miami y tienen que pasar la línea del estado de Georgia a Florida, y por ejemplo la persona que va manejando y no debería ser el trabajo de la persona que va manejando saber el estatus de todas las personas que van en la camioneta. Pero lo que dice esta ley es si una de esas personas entró sin ser inspeccionado y entró ilegalmente, entonces ahí sí que esa persona que va manejando, si ellos deberían de haber sabido eso acerca de un pasajero, entonces el que va manejando puede ser sujeto de acusado de un delito de contrabando de personas. Pero, ¿qué pasa? Es que la ley de inmigración es muy complicada. A veces nosotros no sabemos el estatus específico que tenemos, o si entramos con inspección. Es muy difícil, va a ser difícil saber eso. Entonces, ¿quién puede ser? Podría ser, y este es el problema con esta ley, porque lo que dice es que si es alguien que no fue inspeccionado, tenemos muchas situaciones en que alguien puede haber entrado sin ser inspeccionado, pero ahora son residentes, porque así es como funciona la ley federal de inmigración. Pero también puede ser que alguien está indocumentado ahora, pero entró con una visa Entonces, entró legalmente, fue inspeccionado y admitido, usando ese término, um, pero luego se quedó y ahora ya no tiene visa y no está indocumentado. La ley como está escrita no necesariamente aplica a esa persona. Pero el problema que tenemos es que no sabemos cómo la policía, los sheriffs, el departamento estatal de policía, no sabemos cómo ellos van a interpretar esta ley y cuáles son las direcciones que ellos van a recibir. Ellos tal vez van a pensar, si alguien está indocumentado, entonces esta ley aplica. Y tal vez eso no es el caso. Entonces, yo diría, primero, lo más importante para protegernos es que si alguien no sabe su estatus exacto y tiene alguna duda de si esta ley va a aplicar, es que necesitan hablar con un abogado de inmigración licenciado y tener esa clarificación. Si es para usted, para su hermana, hermano, mamá, papá, abuelo, quien sea, si alguien en su familia no está seguro, eso necesita tener esa clarificación. Eso es lo primero. Y luego yo diría que también es muy importante entender que en este momento no sabemos exactamente cómo va a ser interpretada esta ley. Y esto debe pasar solo cruzando de otro estado a la Florida. No tiene nada que ver con el transporte público ni manejando personas dentro del estado. Cuando ya están adentro del estado, como de día a día, tomar el autobús, tomar un Uber, cosas así, dentro del estado, eso no, esta ley no toca eso. La versión anterior sí, pero esta versión no. Entonces, cambió bastante esta ley y esta solo tiene que ver con el transporte de fuera del estado para adentro y pasando esa línea, entrando al estado. Entonces, creo que eso es la mayoría de los puntos que tenía acerca de esta ley. Y creo que mencioné que para personas menos de 18 es un delito de segundo grado, entonces eso tiene más tiempo en la cárcel si pasa todo el caso y todo eso. Entonces, eso es 15 años, el delito de tercer grado es 5 años. Entonces, es importante saber eso también para asesar el riesgo. Y la otra cosa que quiero decir es que aunque no sabemos cómo la policía va a interpretar la ley, ellos tampoco necesariamente van a saber cómo buscar el estatus de personas, de los pasajeros, ni la persona que va manejando. Entonces es algo que creo que ojalá que han oído antes de que ellos no tienen que saber su estatus. Si la policía para un carro y dice, ustedes no, se les fue la luz y pasaron la luz roja. Eso no tiene nada que ver con su estatus. ¿Ok? Entonces, aunque ellos pueden preguntar y ellos tal vez quieran saber, no es requerido contestar esa pregunta, ni de qué país son o cuál es su estatus. Y otra distinción importante es si si la policía para un carro, necesitan tener una razón para justificar eso. Y esa justificación tiene que ser basado en una ley estatal. Entonces tiene que ser que el carro no está, que cuando ven la placa, que no está registrada o que no obedeció alguna ley de tráfico o tal vez tiene que ver algo que va contra la ley. Si va manejando demasiado rápido, por ejemplo, es otro ejemplo. Y luego dentro de cada condado es un poco diferente cómo manejan, cómo la policía reacciona y qué pueden hacer si la persona que va manejando no tiene la licencia. Porque cuando alguien no tiene la licencia, típicamente hay 3 opciones, pero no todos los condados funcionan igual. Entonces puede ser que si alguien no tiene la licencia, pueden ser arrestados o les pueden dar un ticket, sí, un papel, ¿verdad? Um, o nomás los pueden dejar ir y decirles, necesitas sacar tu licencia. Entonces depende de dónde está, en cuál condado está, de cómo va a funcionar eso. Pero la policía no debe y no puede parar a alguien por razón que piensan que la persona que va manejando o los pasajeros son indocumentados. Esa no es una razón por cual se debe parar un carro. Entonces, por eso es importante que todos, aunque también los ciudadanos también no, no ofrezcan la información acerca de su estatus. Y creo que eso es todo lo que yo iba a repasar acerca de la parte acerca del contrabando de personas.
Sí, y estuve ahí respondiendo las preguntas en inglés, pero hay una en español. Eh, cuando estabas hablando de los condados, aquí preguntan cómo averiguamos esas leyes al nivel del condado sobre las licencias.
Bueno, yo diría que, bueno, hay un un web, es un poco complicada a manejar, que tiene todas las leyes, pero también la otra manera, bueno, yo diría que Flick tiene mucha información acerca de eso por todo el estado. Ellos van a saber la información de cómo diferentes condados funcionan. Por ejemplo, creo que en Broward County, por ejemplo, ellos han dicho que si alguien no tiene la licencia, que ellos no tienen ninguna opción más que arrestar a la persona. Pero creo que eso no siempre pasa en otros condados. Entonces es un poco diferente. Pero creo que Flex tiene la información más comprensiva.
Ok, vamos a hablar rapidito sobre los hospitales.
Ok. Entonces, la segunda parte de la ley que es un poco confusa y que es muy importante entender es la parte que tiene que ver con el rastro de información de pacientes en hospitales. Entonces, esta parte es importante entender que requiere que un hospital que recibe Medicaid ahora tiene que preguntar acerca del estatus de inmigración de cada paciente. Entonces, ¿cómo es que se va a ver? ¿Cuál es el impacto de día a día? En los formularios de registración en los hospitales y los formularios de paciente cuando primero llegan al hospital o a la emergencia, van a preguntar en esas formas si el paciente es ciudadano o si tiene permiso de estar en los Estados Unidos o si no tiene permiso de estar en los Estados Unidos. Esa es la ley. Esa es la pregunta. Ese es el cambio más grande que va a tener, que esa pregunta va a estar en los formularios. También esta nueva ley tiene que tener información en ese mismo formulario. Tiene que decir que esto no va a afectar el cuidado de los pacientes. Okay. Entonces, no pueden rechazar a alguien, no pueden decir, bueno, les puedo dar este cuidado, pero no es. Eso no debe pasar. El cuidado de las personas no debe cambiar. Los pacientes son los pacientes y ya. El cambio es que hay esta pregunta en los formularios, empezando en julio. La segunda parte es esos mismos formularios de registración tampoco, bueno, van a decir también que tampoco se permite que el hospital llame a la migrante, que su respuesta a la pregunta en el formulario no, no va a resultar en contacto a ICE, que no va a afectar su cuidado como paciente. Entonces, eso va a estar en los formularios y eso debe de estar ahí. Si no está, entonces el hospital está quebrando la ley. Entonces, es importante entender que va a tener diferentes opciones esos formularios. Um, lo que va a pasar, ¿qué es lo que va a pasar con esta información? Esa información va a ir a una agencia estatal acerca de la salud y va a tener el total de personas que fueron a la emergencia y, y entonces solo va a tener los números en total. Eso es lo que debe ir. No, no debe tener información identificando los pacientes ni nada, nada así. Entonces solo debe ser los números que van y este rastro de información que va a la agencia del Estado. Y luego, ¿qué pasa después de eso? Luego esa agencia va a mandar un reporte con esos números cada año al gobernador y los líderes del Senado y Casa de Representantes. Entonces, no va a incluir nombres ni otros datos, solo los números totales de personas admitidas y visitas a la emergencia. Y ese reporte va a decir cuántas personas contestaron que son ciudadanos o que tienen permiso de estar en los Estados Unidos o que no tienen permiso o que no contestaron la pregunta. Entonces, eso quiere decir que la ley ya está anticipando que que pacientes no van a contestar la pregunta. Entonces, que lo que creo que sería mejor es que todos, si es ciudadano, residente, con visa, indocumentado, no importa. Si hay una opción para no contestar, entonces toma esa opción y no contesta. No se contesta esa pregunta. Porque como contesta no debe tener impacto en su cuidado como paciente y tampoco debe resultar en comunicación con ICE o con autoridades de inmigración. Gaby, no sé si quieres agregar algo.
No, yo creo que si cualquier persona tenga otra pregunta, no las puede hacer. Ya estamos llegando al final de esta presentación, pero quería asegurarme de que rapidito repasemos. Yo sé que muchas personas están preguntando y capaz vamos a hacer esa pregunta. AJ, esta ley dice que compañías o empleadores que tienen más de 25 personas, ellos tienen que requieren que la persona mande, ¿verdad? Los employees por el sistema de E-Verify. ¿Eso es ahora nuevos empleadores o tienen que ser los que están en este momento también con compañías de más de 25 personas?
Eso va a ser empezando en julio, cuando hay, por ejemplo, si vas y aplicas a un trabajo en julio, en ese momento, eso es cuando se tiene que mandar la información a E-Verify. No va a ser como retroactivo y se va a mandar todo de todos los empleados que ya están trabajando ahí. Eso no debe de ser como funciona. Debe de ser empezando en julio para las personas que aplican a una compañía de más de 25 personas y luego ahí se empieza a mandar todo a E-Verify.
Sí, porque creo que personas están diciendo, bueno, si yo estoy trabajando en este momento, me van a requerir ahora en el futuro llenar ese formulario de E-Verify.
No, no se debe requerir, porque y realmente ese sistema de E-Verify es como, es un poco, no sirve realmente. Y entonces van a haber situaciones en que personas que sí tienen permiso de trabajar, tal vez ese sistema los va a rechazar, pero por eso es importante saber cuáles, porque todas las compañías deben dar una lista de los documentos que puede dar y las diferentes opciones para la información de identificación. Entonces eso es importante porque a veces también ese sistema a veces no está funcionando y ni se pueden meter los datos. Entonces va a ser todo un va a ser un lío cuando se empieza a usar E-Verify por todo.
Sí. Bueno, yo creo que también la otra pregunta es, porque cuando se habla de esta ley de transportar a la Florida una persona, no solamente es por carro, como dijo AJ, también puede ser por bus, puede ser por tren y puede ser también por avión. Y las personas están un poquito confusas porque sabemos que el sistema de transportación de los Estados Unidos es algo federal, no es algo estatal. Y los aeropuertos no tienen los oficiales, no son estatales, sino federales. El TSA, por ejemplo, es un programa federal, empleados federales. Entonces, yo creo que la pregunta es, ¿cómo eso cambia? Y yo creo que simplemente, yo creo que la pregunta es, ¿afectaría a una persona indocumentada que está viajando al estado de la Florida, así sea que tenga un pasaporte, lo que sea, ¿verdad? A la Florida, ¿eso afectaría esta ley, esta persona que es indocumentada entrando al estado de la Florida?
No creo que debe cambiar eso, porque cuando uno va al aeropuerto, es TSA que decide si esa persona puede viajar, si puede entrar, si puede pasar por el security. No es la policía estatal, no es el sheriff, no es alguien local, esos son agentes federales. Entonces, típicamente alguien que está indocumentado normalmente no va a viajar por avión. um, es, bueno, porque TSA requiere um, típicamente requieren ver que sí puede estar en los Estados Unidos. Y ellos son TSA es parte del Departamento de Homeland Security. Entonces son agentes federales. Um, y eso está dentro de todas las leyes federales de inmigración y de seguridad. Entonces, eso es toda una área diferente. Esta ley no debe cambiar eso, porque eso es un sistema de todo el país y la ley de Florida no puede cambiar esa ley. Entonces, va a seguir siendo TSA quien decide quién puede viajar por avión, si vienes a Florida o si vas a Washington, D.C., no importa, esa es la decisión de TSA y esa decisión no va a ser dependiente de esta ley.
Bueno, ya estamos a tiempo. Quiero decirle gracias a AJ. Yo sé que hay algunas preguntas ahí. Um, estoy dispuesta a quedarme unos tiempitos más. No sé si AJ, how you're fine.
Sí
Okay.
puedo. Sí.
Okay. Entonces, I'm going to switch over to English.
Okay.
Questions that are coming in are in English, and I think it's a little bit easier for us to answer these. But I want to say thank you to the team and the students and the families that joined us today. Again, this is being recorded, so we will be able to share it. I know it's going to probably take you 2 to 3 times to listen to it because it's a lot of information, a lot of legal pieces of it, but we want to be able to tell you that we're here for you, that if you need resources, I know this is causing a lot of stress in a lot of you and your families, but we want to be able to provide you with the support and services. And also to let you know that if anybody is either misusing this law to create fear, to try to extort you or tell you certain things that are not correct, that there are organizations like the SPLC, MALDEF, the Florida Immigrant Coalition that are ready to support and help you out. So do not let yourself be victims of sometimes, terrible people that want to use the fear that this governor and the legislature is using to be able to put you into further hiding or put you in a predicament that might not be good. So, do you need to go to the hospital? Can you go to the hospital? Yes. Can you still have, if you're a DACA recipient or TPS person and have a driver's license in the state of Florida, can you drive in the state of Florida? Yes, this doesn't change anything. And so we want to make sure that you know that. But if you are undocumented, regardless of this law, it is a risk. And unfortunately, you do run the risk of immigration coming regardless of this law or not. So just be aware that it's really key and important that you know your rights, that you know who to reach out to, that if you have the ability to talk to an immigration attorney and understand better your situation, that you do. And the same way that you go and get a health checkup every year with your doctor or every so often, right, with your doctor, that is also really key and important that you do that with an immigration attorney. And I think AJ said it best when she said a licensed immigration attorney. Make sure that you are going, I know there's a lot of notario fraud. There's actually some not so good immigration attorneys. So we want to make sure that you go to somebody that you trust and that you understand that we also have support services for you, that there are pro bono, low bono, if you cannot afford an immigration attorney, that those options are there for you. And as Kane put in, we do have our next immigration Q&A with our immigration attorney, Dan Berger, next May 25th at 5 p.m., where half of it is going to be answering immigration questions, general immigration questions, and the other half is going to be the Know Your Rights. So really quickly, there was a student that asked about traveling within the state. Again, can you clarify that? Because they said, so this means that undocumented people can travel to Florida or any other state. And then the question before that was, I'm going to be in Orlando. If I go from Orlando to Naples by bus, is that a problem if I'm undocumented?
So travel inside the state is not in this bill. This bill only has to do with if you are outside of Florida and you're traveling into Florida. So that's what the human smuggling piece has to do with. If you are taking local bus transportation, if you're taking an Uber, if your friend is giving you a ride to class, if you are driving your mom to church inside of the state, this law doesn't apply. Okay. It only applies if you're traveling from outside of state. And I do see also that there is a question also about flying in and having a real ID. So this doesn't change what a real ID is based on federal law, that it doesn't change. So whatever TSA uses right now to decide who can fly and who can pass through security, that doesn't change right now. And they have their entire list of what constitutes a real ID, and that doesn't change. This law doesn't change that. It only changes what is done for state level, crossing from state lines, and this is going to be Georgia and Alabama, really, going across state lines.
Yeah. And I'm going to put in, I know that somebody asked about Florida driver's license, who can apply one. So I put it there, the section that you can go and see. But again, if you are a DACA recipient, if you are a TPS holder, if you are a green card holder, this doesn't change who can or cannot get a driver's license. That was not part of the bill. It does invalidate, if you are undocumented, driver's licenses from out of state. But I do want to say that that's another one of these laws that we're still trying to figure out what it means, how it's going to be implemented, because as it is, anybody, it doesn't matter if you are a citizen or not, if you have an out-of-state license and you make Florida your home, you are required after 30 days to change that to a Florida driver's license anyway. So we just want to make sure that you understand a lot of this is also some of the pieces red meat, and that it is supposed to cause fear in the community, to be able to put them in a very bad situation and in a bad predicament. So again, this is why I repeat it, like knowing your rights is going to be really key. And while yes, a police officer can stop you for speeding, or a police officer can stop you for having a broken taillight, there is certain things that you can do to protect yourself and protect the people that are in the car if you get stopped and they start asking questions like immigration questions. You do have the right to remain silent, and that is your constitutional right. So it's key that you understand and know that. So any other question that you see, AJ, that you think we should answer? Or
So I see some questions about, like, for example, banking. So this law does not apply to banking. This law doesn't talk about that. So if a bank is saying we need this or that, because of this new law, the answer is first, this law doesn't go into effect until July 1st. And second, whatever the bank is wrong. This law is not the reason they're asking for that information. If there are banking laws that require that, then that is something separate. But it's not this new state law that would require that additional information. And then I think I saw a question about authorities transporting people. So what will that could be an entire other hour-long conversation as well. But the short and long of it is this will only govern state and local law enforcement. It's not going to. This new law doesn't necessarily say that. It's not saying that federal immigration authorities have to do X, Y, or Z, right? However, there is I think a natural result of this, and there are other sections of this bill that we didn't cover today that are going to increase that coordination between local and federal immigration authorities, and that could result in additional. It could result in additional deportations or detaining folks. Because there is nothing to stop local immigration authority or local law enforcement. Sorry, there's nothing to stop a local sheriff from calling ICE and saying, I have this person. They're not supposed to do that. Sheriffs are not supposed to do that without any sort of basis like a detainer request, but it could happen. So if there are reports of that sort of increased enforcement without any justification, and it's based on some discriminatory reason, then we do need to know about that, and that does need to be reported to us.
okay, so we want to again let you know that we're going to be sharing information as we get it. We are creating these documents that you can freely use and share with others. We are making sure that the documents are vetted and looked at by attorneys to make sure that the information is correct. We ask you to please do not, share any information that you see out there that might be a little, that you do not know the source of where it's coming from, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. Like, for example, about the banking, we've seen a couple of people already say that the rumors, right, that, oh, you have to take your money out, they're not going to let you get your money out of the bank. All of that is incorrect. Also, we've been seeing people saying, oh, there's increase in rates and they're going to be coming to your house, so you really need to leave the state of Florida. Again, we have not seen that, but if you do hear of things like that are happening, you have to, speak up and let us know. And we will be sharing this information with SPLC to see if there's opportunities there. One of the things that I also want to let you know is that right now there is conversations around lawsuits that organizations are going to do once they understand a little bit more this law. So it's twofold, right? Right now, until July, this is not going to be implemented. We don't know how it's going to be implemented, so we really need some few months to be able to see that. But if you see something happening now, let us know. We will alert the attorneys at SPLC and other organizations. And we will share with you resources that we're going to be doing in English and Spanish, and share with you resources of organizations like the Florida Immigrant Coalition that are part of a broader coalition of organizations all throughout the state, in Orlando, in Naples, etc., that you can also make sure that you get good information. So if I don't know, AJ, is there anything else you want to say before we end?
I would say just stay calm for now and make sure that you're getting the right information, like Gabby was saying. There's still some time before this law goes into effect. So if you do see anybody panicking or talk to anybody who's panicking, let them know what you heard today, and you can direct them to TheDream.Us. You can direct them to SPLC, and I would say pretty much every immigrant justice organization in the state of Florida is attuned to this. And so I would turn to one of those organizations and get in touch with someone who has that actual information before there's any sort of widespread panic or misinformation that continues to spread.
Okay, so thank you again. If you need any mental health resources or supports, please reach out to the advisors. If you're an alumni and you haven't, you're no longer connected with the institutions, we're working right now to try to find somebody that can do in group settings, and we'll probably do a couple of sessions just to invite the community and have your families and whoever else wants to participate, so that we can go through this together. And I think the last thing I just want to echo what AJ said, please understand that you have so many people behind you, supporting you, fighting for you, and you're not alone in this. And please do not panic. Please just, take a step back, take a breath, contact us if you need to, if you have any questions, and you have SPLC, Florida Immigrant Coalition, and others there. And also, of course, TheDream.Us. So thank you for joining us today. We'll be in touch, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.